Hey everybody, what we are looking at is my 125 gallon tank, and what we are listening to is my waterfall. Unfortunately, I have to stand right in front of my waterfall if we want to get the entire length of the 125 all in one go there. So never mind about the waterfall, that's not a part of this video. In fact, I've got all the lights and everything shut down so we can see what we're going to be doing in this video, and that is going to be a big water change and plant removal. I'm going to get the glass cleaned up, and I think I'm probably going to get in there and do some work on the filter while I've got the opportunity today. You can see how much grunge is growing on the glass. I need to get all of that cleaned up. I'm hoping to get in here and thin some of that Java out, especially towards the back, and maybe even see if I can pull some of it out of right up against the front. It is literally growing up flat, smashed against the glass. All that stuff you can see right there is actually lying against the glass. So that not only reduces the amount of room the fish have to swim around, it reduces the water flow and the circulation and everything. So we're going to get in there and do something about that Java. That's getting just a little too thick for my liking. We've also got a bunch of the Java Windelov, which is that sort of fingery Java fern. I'm not going to remove any of that per se, but if there's little young ones and babies and whatnot growing through there and little root clusters, I'll pull some of that out, which will ultimately result in thinning it, but I'm not going to actually remove any of it as far as like pulling the rhizome off of the wood, or I'm not going to do anything that's going to risk detaching it from the wood. Probably going to leave all this stuff here alone. Not too concerned about that at the moment. I might get in there and try to remove some of that Java fern, but the real thing I'm going to get in and do at this end of the tank is going to be work on my water lily here. If we look upwards, we can see that this whole entire end of the tank is covered with water lily. It's not, well, I don't know, it's probably different species grow in different ways. When I think of a lily pad, I think of those huge pads that have like an upturned lip that creates almost like a shallow cup floating on the water, whereas these just lay across the surface of the water, and I guess they're lily pads for this species. I don't know, I just think of them as leaves on the surface or whatever. We can call them lily pads, why not? But that's what this whole entire end of the tank looks like. It's just covered with leaves. So that's blocking a huge amount of light. It's preventing gas exchange, and of course it reduces the circulation around and the water flow at the surface and so on and so forth. So we're going to get in there, and you can see all of these real long runners. We're going to get in there and trim all those out, and I'm going to do a pretty big water change, probably work on the filter. Don't know if I mentioned that or not yet, but there you go. Not going to bother with shooting any of the video while we're doing it. Going to turn some music on, have at it, and then we'll get a look at what it looks like before. So right there's your before, and there's your after. So as usual, whenever I do a water change on this tank, my rainbow fish go crazy and start displaying their spawning behavior. So we're getting plenty of that. You can see I removed a ton of the floating water sprite down here. There was a lot more of it in there than I thought, and so that lets plenty of light into the end of the tank. I also wanted to mention that recently my heater went up in this tank. I'm not sure what was wrong with it, but it didn't seem to be operating properly. So better safe than sorry. I just went ahead and replaced it. And the heater I put in there is actually designed for a turtle tank. It does not have a knob to adjust the temperature inside the tank. It's got a button outside the tank, and that prevents the turtle from clawing on it or, you know, adjusting the temperature by accident. I'm not worried about that with my fish, but that's just the way this thermometer is set up. The other aspect of it is shatterproof. Not only is it a titanium outer casing rather than glass, but it is also a titanium heating element, so it should last even longer. It's also got an overheat protection. Unfortunately, the overheat protection is set for 94 degrees. So, you know, it would get pretty hot before it would actually shut down. But it wouldn't keep going. You know, eventually it will shut down. So I like that the display is right there on the front, and I can also set it between either Celsius or Fahrenheit. So instead of having to figure out what Celsius is, I can just leave it set at what I'm used to, and at a glance I know where my tank's sitting and everything's fine. So that's good. I rooted through some of the Java fern there, and that is really, really well established stuff. I wound up just kind of going down here and grabbing a handful and breaking it loose, and what it was fronds had come through the woodwork there and were growing out and up. Let me do that, make it a little easier to see. So the fronds were growing through those holes and out from underneath of it, and just sort of growing up across the front of the glass. So I tore them out of there. I didn't want to break away any of the rhizomes. It's really, really wrapped around this piece of wood solidly. And so what I wound up doing was just going in the back, and you'll notice that on Java fern, a lot of times what you'll get is this sort of hair-like mats of roots that come off of it, and there was a bunch of that in the back, and there was a bunch of that sort of down inside the middle, and I got in there and I ripped all that free and got a lot of that out of there. There was a lot of mulm and stuff had collected in there, so we got a lot of that cleaned out. Didn't do anything to the top there, like I said I wasn't going to do. I did spray a bunch of hydrogen peroxide on some of that stuff, so that's all sort of half probably dead and scummy. This is probably going to make the tank look a lot less pleasant because I'm going to knock all that stuff loose. So yeah, I killed off a bunch of that stuff by spraying it with the hydrogen peroxide while it was exposed above water during the, we can call it the low tide, while the water was down. And so that's all broken loose, and I'll get in there and that filter will clean that all out. I did change out the filter. It was surprisingly not very dirty, so I was happy about that. As far as down here, I pulled a few dead fronds out of my Java fern here, and then the real scissor action happened on the water lily, and also on some of my Anubias in the back. I've got a different species of Anubias that's really tall with very long leaf stems on it, and a bunch of those were growing up across the surface, and they were blocking as much of the light as the lily pads were, or whatever we've decided to call them. So I cut a bunch of that out of there. I cleaned a bunch of the roots and stuff out like I did at the other end, and just basically ran my fingers through it and stirred up a bunch of the detritus and mulm and stuff that had collected in there. This piece of wood right here is actually concave, and there I can actually stick a gravel vac all the way down underneath of there, all the way down into here, and whenever I do, it's basically just, you know, stuff just comes, it's just so much stuff gets collected under there, and it's been a really long time since I've actually lifted that up and done any gravel vacuuming under there, and everything's also grown down onto it now. I don't even know how easily it would be able to lift up. So I don't know, maybe one of these days we'll have a look at that just so I can show everybody how much mulm is actually collected underneath of there. I'm really enjoying the way my snakeskin gourami is darting in and out, hiding in the leaves. If you didn't notice him, my Tenopoma is hiding right there. I know it's kind of hard to tell, but there's his tail, and his head's tucked in down here. He really has not been the same since my Synodontis died. He's much more reclusive, and he hardly even comes out when it's feeding time anymore. He'll wait until everybody else is done feeding, and then he'll come down to the other end of the tank and get his food. So I don't know if that's my imagination or not, but it really seems like he's a lot more reclusive and a lot less outgoing since my Synodontis died. And for my regular viewers, you'll remember that that was the fish that I called them my odd couple. They were always together. They always swam around the tank together. So it almost seems like he's bummed out that his buddy's gone. Again, don't want to put too much human emotion on fish, but that's the impression I would get, is that he's bummed out that his buddy's gone. He just seems to be sulking all the time now. It's kind of odd. So there you go, everybody. My rainbow fish are going to be looking really good for a few days while they do their spawning stuff. Now that they got some nice fresh water in the tank, that is pretty much always the case whenever I do a water change, as I said. So there you go. That is a look at my 125-gallon tank. Let me step back here without tripping over anything. One final look at the whole tank. So thanks for watching. Make sure you subscribe. You never know what you're going to get with me. Don't forget this one is my 125 gallon tank, and I'll see you real soon in the next one.